Welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily with Kyle Elfrink and Ray Flowers, Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to use the promo code FSD20 for a 20% discount on the products over at fantasyguru.com.
Welcome back to another fresh week. 5 coming your way of Fantasy Sports Daily. Kyle Elfrink and Ray Flowers with you, powered by fantasyguru.com. We get things rolling on a Monday, which means we get to recap a fairly entertaining week 13. I can't say that everything was exciting. New England and Chargers. Oh my gosh. Ray, how many minutes do you think you gave that game yesterday? The Chargers and the Patriots.
Yeah, I'm struck by 5, like not a lot. But
yeah, I'm going to say there were more points scored in that game than minutes that I cared about that game.
Yeah, that game brought home the fact that there's just some crappy NFL football right now. Mm-hmm. And if you're not a fan of the team, there are some games that are borderline unwatchable. There's some bad stuff going on in 2023.
But there was plenty of good stuff, most notably wide receivers. Like every week, we get points from wide receivers. We had some good quarterbacks, running backs, of course, even some good tight ends. But maybe you're the person who was let down by some efforts on Sunday, or maybe you're the person celebrating on this Monday morning. It is great to have you with us. We will be with you for the next hour plus. Ray and I will go game by game on that Sunday and give you our takeaways from week number 13. And then before we get out of here, we'll check in with Ryan Clifford, talk a little Monday Night Football. We've got one more game this week that will feature Cincinnati taking on Jacksonville. And we'll even sneak in a little baseball because the winter meetings have begun in Nashville, Tennessee. Had a bit of a surprising trade in baseball last night. Maybe we'll get some big name free agents with some new deals this week. So we'll take a preview of what to expect in Tennessee. As for yesterday, the headlines as we see them on this Monday, Green Bay, a huge win against the Kansas City Chiefs, and Jordan Love continues to make strides, as does Christian Watson until he kind of overstrided and had late injury. So we'll talk about that. 49ers looking pretty darn good against the Philadelphia Eagles. If you took a chance on Devin Achane, you won on Sunday in week 13. Tyreek Hill, I don't think we can have a Monday show without talking about the latest exploits from Tyreek Hill. We'll check in on the Houston Texans, who got a huge effort from Nico Collins. Unfortunately, it was colored by the loss of Tank Dell, who is lost for the season. Couple of young tight ends continue to make some strides. Mike Evans continues to make history, and the NFL continues to give us injuries. Derrick Henry, Amari Cooper, Ramondre Stevenson, Brian Robinson. Ray, yesterday might have been, of all of our 13 weeks this season, I can't recall another week where we had more significant in-game injuries, like where guys who were starting everywhere just left early. If you had any, Henry still got his 100 yards. He still got 2 touchdowns. But a lot of these guys left so early that it really beat you up when it came to final point totals. We have injuries every week, and we have guys missing games. But in terms of guys that were healthy enough to start on Sunday, we had a lot of guys fail to make it through week number 13.
It was I don't know if it was the worst, but it was bad. And it was so bad that I even lost Jerome Baker in my IDP league, who got injured on a tackle attempt near the goal line when his teammate ran into him. So, yeah, it wasn't just the offensive guys either. It was the guys on the defensive side of the ball that were dealing with some physical issues in week 13.
You know, it kind of had me wondering, and I don't think I would be in support of this, Ray, but it had me wondering, maybe we should just take the idea of starting lineups and throw it in the trash and just play teams.
Like a best ball kind of?
Yeah, not really. No.
Okay.
Get all the points from your 14-man roster or what, but all 14 guys start. Now, as soon as I thought that, Ray, the attraction and the agony of fantasy football is lineup decisions. You know? But the idea of losing guys mid-game and not having any options, and I just kind of was thinking out loud to myself, like literally talking to the walls yesterday. I wonder if we should just scrap the starting lineup and just say you play all your guys. Like, here's my team against your team, and let's see who gets the most points.
The problem that I see with you, and we didn't talk about this before the show began, the problem I see with this is this would invalidate handcuffing, because there's no point to have a guy on your bench that's only going to get 3 points if everyone kind of counts. It would lead to more roster churn, which again, some people love that. So maybe that is something that people be interested in. But I think that there certainly should be / could be a place for the team point totals, for the bench point totals. As long as everyone knows what the setup is going in, I think you can make that case. I wouldn't really want to do that, but I can understand it, Kyle.
Well, and you'd also have to invoke a rule of which Ray and I have never been in favor of, because a lot of leagues have rules like this, but limiting the number of guys you could have at a certain position, i.e. quarterbacks.
3 bench quarterbacks.
Because obviously the way you roll the league is I'm going to have 7 QBs on my bench. So you'd have to probably limit it to 2, maybe a max of 3. And again, I'm not in favor of it, but it just got me thinking of maybe a better way. But we'll leave that for the off season as we continue to find things of better ways. Best way to save at Fantasy Guru, FSD20. You see it right there. 20% off of everything. And of course, if you're looking for some DFS or even season-long NFL help, we've got that package, which is on sale for the rest of the season. $99.99. We'll take you through the remainder of 2023 and into January with the playoff football coverage. So make sure to check that out. Okay, Ray, let's get rolling. And we don't usually start with Sunday Night Football, but I am going to start there on this Monday. Got to say it was an impressive win. And I don't know if last night told us more about the Packers or more about the Chiefs. I would argue probably more about the Packers because we know what the Chiefs are. They're a championship contender. Maybe they aren't as sharp or as ahead of the game as they have been in recent years, but they're still one of the top 3 or 4 teams, I think it's fair to say, in the NFL. Green Bay last night as the home team, Ray, came out and really dominated, had a great game plan. They had long drives, and Jordan Love looked the part. And we are seeing in the last month, Ray, some certain growth from Jordan Love. And it reminds us, again, everybody wants to make big decisions on these QBs and say, oh, they're no good, or wow, the Packers made a mistake. So you got to let it play out. And I think you and I have been pro Love for a while. Like, you got to see what this guy can do. And I'm not saying, the last 4 weeks, oh, this is what Jordan Love. What I'm saying is the skill set's there, Ray. This guy's not overmatched. He's got good, he's got bad, he's got strong games, he has weak games. But overall, you can win with Jordan Love. I think that has been proven. And I think for the Packers' sake, they're in a pretty decent spot looking forward with Jordan Love.
Yeah, I think that if I had to give a critique, I think he needs to clean up his mechanics. And I've said this previously. I don't know if this is from watching, Aaron Rodgers for a couple of years or what, but Love's mechanics aren't very good. And he does rely on improvisation and arm strength. And there are quarterbacks that do that and do it tremendously well, right? I'd like to see him, square up his body, his shoulders, his hips, get things moving toward his target, stepping into the ball and all that kind of stuff. But the end result right now, even with him out not doing that, has been very good. Like you said, the last couple of weeks in particular, Thursday on Thanksgiving, last night, he's looked sharp. And with the quarterback play on a weekly basis devolving in the NFL to the point where we're going to start calling high school kids in because this is just awful. Like, there's such bad quarterback play across the land. Yeah, Jordan Love, if you're the Packers, you might have been a little nervous at points this season, but right now you've got to be feeling pretty good about him.
And as a fantasy player, I don't know if I'm to the point where I say, Jordan Love's been in my QB2 all season, and now I'm thinking about starting him. It'll depend on matchups and injuries. I will say, Ray, to end the season, Giants, Bucks, Panthers, Vikings, and then if you play Week 18, the Bears. They're not a tough matchup coming up for Jordan Love. Now, again, I don't think that's going to vault him to like being a QB1 down the stretch. I'm not ready to call that. I mean, there are going to be bad throws, like you note. He's still learning. Last night was good. It was a step in the right direction. Something we got to be slightly concerned with is we finally get around to seeing Christian Watson do things again. He had the big Thanksgiving. He had the big Sunday night. But Ray, with 3 minutes to go on Sunday night, he pulls up lame. Running on an end around, he goes down. He immediately clutches his hamstring. That's the same injury that he had back in August that pretty well wiped out his September. And you could maybe make the argument he's been dealing with that hamstring all season. Knowing his history, Ray, I'm kind of worried about the next week or two for getting Christian Watson back on the field.
Yeah, Watson's been a really tough one this year because a lot of people that drafted him probably dropped him at some point because he really hadn't done anything. And then, as you note here, with the ascension of Jordan Love and with the way things are kind of evolving in the offense for the Packers, he's now, Watson, taking that step to being that every week starter. And here we go again. And I don't know if it's weather induced or what, but there are just some guys that, there's some guys that can't stay on the football field. And this has got to be incredibly frustrating for Watson because, it's been something he's been working with and through. A lot of young guys need to change up their training methods, that kind of thing to find that sweet spot where everything works. And I think the bottom line right now is that people that had Watson the last 2 weeks and enjoyed that have got to be planning otherwise, because it certainly looked like, as you said last night, Kyle, that he's missing some time. We haven't had a report yet today as to what that might be, but I can't anticipate him being available the next game for the Packers.
Well, and he is still such a touchdown heavy piece to the puzzle. He's a wide receiver 3. I mean, this is not an offense that is going to load up on 30-point efforts. They're not going to be an offense that says, hey, Jordan Love, go out there and throw 35 times. I mean, you're not going to get that with the Packers nor with Christian Watson. So, hey, it was good last night. Great effort for the Packers. Good to see A.J. Dillon actually kind of doing something. On the Chiefs side, Ray, this is kind of stunning. They're 11th in the NFL in points scored. And I mentioned, hey, they're just not as sharp as usual. And this happens. People kind of think, oh, it just keeps going and going and going. And they're still, they're not a dynasty, but they're a really good team over the last decade. They're constantly there. They have this otherworldly QB, maybe the greatest tight end of all time. Last night, it was just kind of there for the Chiefs. For a fantasy player, the disappointment's Patrick Mahomes, probably.
Yeah.
And the numbers just aren't there. Anybody who drafted him as the first QB off the board kind of swung and miss. The good sign, as I saw the Chiefs last night, is Pacheco's becoming a runner, Ray.
Yep.
Now, the problem is he's never going to be in an offense that says, yeah, be our guy. They're always going to be a team that says, if we got to win and we got to score, we're going through Patrick Mahomes. They're always going to throw the football. But Pacheco is doing as well as I think you could ever do in an offense built this way. He has grown. What I like about it, Ray, is they've consistently just kind of played him. And they didn't say, hey, you got to be great right off the start. You got to be a difference maker immediately. They've just given him more and more and more. And over the course of 2 years, he's probably become a top 15 running back in the NFL at this point.
Yeah, right now he's a top 12 running back this season. And, it really benefits him, I think, to not have Jerick McKinnon there, because then we could see, like last night, 3 catches we got from Pacheco. That's kind of been his floor the last month, right? He's been catching even more passes than that at times. If he can augment the 15 to 18 touches on the ground with 3 or 4 in the air, we really have a nice situation going. And you're totally right with Pacheco. I think the real question with Pacheco isn't, is he effective or is he usable? We've determined that. The real question for me is, how long is he going to last? Because that dude runs as hard as anyone. He runs hard. He gets that ball and he's ramming the line of scrimmage and he's lifting the knees up and the whole thing. And I hope he has a longer run than 2 or 3 years here, because he's not exactly avoiding contact. But I think your main point with him is accurate, that it's hard to look at Pacheco and think this guy's really getting 20 touches a week. But in the state of 2023 football, if it's 14 or 15 and a couple of those are catches and maybe there's a touchdown every other week, something like that, he's obviously a weekly starter.
Yeah. Big win for the Packers. Chiefs, by the way, are now 8-4 with that loss. Now they're not in danger of missing out on anything, but kind of surprising to see them sitting with 4 losses at this juncture. And their next game is against Buffalo. Bills have to come into Arrowhead, so that'll be another showdown. And I don't know about you, Ray, but like the last 3 weeks, why are all the Titans of the NFL facing off? Like, I don't know if the NFL dreamed it up this way, but like, we're going to go to Philadelphia next. Like the Eagles, what they have had to face the last 3 weeks, and they got Dallas now. Like the Eagles get trampled on Sunday, 42-19, but I kind of understand it, Ray. I mean, this Eagles team has had to battle the best of the best with Kansas City, with Buffalo, with San Francisco, now with Dallas. And you see Kansas City, facing all these good teams, and San Francisco's got a really tough run coming up. Buffalo has had to go through a buzzsaw. It's kind of wild how this has all matched up here in the month of November and now early December with all these great matchups. And it kind of makes the league top heavy. Like there's like 2 or 3 good matchups every week. And then honestly, the other 10 are pretty ho-hum. I mean, there are games that matter like Houston and Denver.
Right.
But really, the best of the best are facing off. And then you have just the rest of the NFL taking up 90% of the schedule.
Well, they do, we always laugh at the strength of schedule. And for those people that have listened to Kyle and I for years, thank you. But we used to be the first people to break down the schedule for the upcoming season. It would come out when our show was on the air and we'd predict, what would happen for the course of the season. The strength of schedule stuff, whatever. But when you're at the top, you play a tough schedule. And when you're at the bottom, you play an easy schedule. And so there's a lot of those teams that could be, 6-11 might end up 9-8 because of the way the schedule's set up, and they might be in playoff contention. So the league plays a part in this with the way they set it up. But like you said, the Eagles in particular, I mean, they've had a rough road. And like you said, they got boat raced yesterday. They got stomped by the 49ers.
I mean, look at a team like Houston. It's a fun story, but they've really played nobody. They just haven't. They played Baltimore in week 1, got destroyed. Jacksonville, okay, that's in their division. Other than that, I mean, I'm sorry, Broncos are solid. They'll make the playoffs maybe, but they're an average team at best. But you've played Arizona and Tampa and Carolina and the Saints and the Falcons and the Steelers and the Colts. Coming up, you've got the Jets, the Titans, the Browns, the Titans again, and the Colts. Like that schedule. And again, it's very impressive what Houston is doing. And kudos, to the head coach for everything he's done, making the move. D'Amico Ryans making the move from San Francisco to Houston. Nobody, that schedule was known 6 months ago, and nobody said, "Oh gosh, that's a 10-win schedule." But Ray, they're going to win 10 games. Houston is, and they get a big win yesterday against Denver. The run of 300-yard efforts by C.J. Stroud is over, but Nico Collins exploded. Ray, I call him Tyreek Hill Jr. And he hasn't done it for years like Tyreek Hill, but look at the yards per catch. Nico Collins is like 16.8, I think, per reception. Even Tyreek Hill, even after yesterday, where Tyreek Hill had 130 yards on 2 catches, Tyreek Hill's under 16. Nico Collins is sniffing 17. He was huge yesterday, but probably the big news coming out of that game, Ray, is the loss of Tank Dell, who has not been a superstar, but has been a big piece to the puzzle, not only for the Texans, but also fantasy players. He's done for the season, fractured fibula on a very unfortunate injury. I don't know how Tank Dell gets into the middle of an offensive and defensive line, but it happened on a touchdown run. Unfortunately, he was rolled up from behind, and he's finished for the season.
Noah Brown's 21 yards a catch too, by the way, Kyle.
But 0 yesterday.
Yeah, right. That was a nice one. Well, it'll be different moving forward now because I'll have an opportunity. The Dell thing, I don't know why a guy who's 5'8", 165 pounds is blocking in the middle of the line. I don't understand it either, but bottom line is he had hurt. It's a terrible injury for the NFL. It's a terrible injury for the Texans and for obviously fantasy folks who had Dell on their team. Nico Collins is now the undisputed number 1. Noah Brown is I think the number 2, despite what we saw yesterday from him. And I think the real question now becomes, does Robert Woods or John Michie kind of become the 3rd? And this is an offense, and we've seen it all year long, and we've talked about it all year long. There has been a wide receiver of their top 4 guys hurt every week. Every single week. This is the first catastrophic injury, but it's like these guys are in and out. And C.J. Stroud continues to be effective. They continue to be in football games, as you noted here. But the takeaway, again, is Collins and Brown, I think they're basically weekly starters for most people at this point. And then it's a determination that we have to make in the fantasy game who that 3rd guy is, and if Dalton Schultz can get back on the field for the next game or not.
Well, and if you're playing DFS week after week, you always kind of look at Houston because they are putting up big numbers. Stroud's throwing a lot, and Collins has had his moments. Dell has had his moments, obviously Noah Brown. But the other frustration with Houston, outside of trying to guess which receiver is going to go off, is now in the backfield, Ray. And I guess we just have to admit that they're going to use Dameon Pierce. And I don't really know why. Devin Singletary in the 2 games without Pierce lapped him. I mean, he looked the part. And I'm not here singing the praises of Devin Singletary. I didn't expect him to go over 100 yards in those 2 games without Pierce. But you now see Pierce back in this lineup. And maybe it's good for Houston, but bad for us. But Ray, Dameon Pierce is getting work. And Devin Singletary is kind of waiting on scraps. That appears to be the way they want to run it down the stretch in Houston.
Yeah, and over at fantasyguru.com, the whole team writes a trending article that comes out each Monday. And I do 2 of those games each week. And one of the games I had was this game with the Texans. And I obviously hit on Devin Singletary. And, he's in the trending down section, not surprisingly. I think that, yes, Pierce is going to be involved. We always knew that. There was always the threat that Pierce would be kind of used at the goal line. But really, the interesting thing is Singletary's still getting the work at the goal line. He's in the mix, at least, for short yardage stuff and goal line stuff. But Pierce got more touches. Pierce was more involved than anyone anticipated, to the point where he was more involved than Singletary. I think also a concern for Singletary is that Dare Ogunbowale was also involved. So it's one thing to say, Pierce, you're the short yardage guy, get us 1st and 2nd. Singletary, you're our 3rd down guy. if Dare is involved too, that takes also away from Singletary. So he's losing carries on early downs. He's losing receptions and opportunities to run routes on third downs to Ogunbowale. It's a tough spot. And right now, Singletary went from going, 20, 100 and a touchdown a couple of weeks in a row to being a guy you can't even utilize moving forward. I don't know how you'd end up starting him at this point.
Well, and for people who have both, because, maybe they followed your advice with handcuffing, right now Pierce is the starter, Ray, if you've got both. I mean, you just have to go in that direction. And I don't have a whole lot of faith in Dameon Pierce. But if he's going to get, what did he have yesterday? 15 carries? He didn't do anything with him. He landed in the end zone and broke the leg of his teammate. I don't know if that's a win or not, but he's getting the work and he's getting the football, and they are giving him the opportunity. Again, 22-17, Houston holding on for that victory. For the Broncos, it was just a really quiet offensive day. Kind of disappointing. Russell Wilson doesn't even get to 200 yards. I kind of looked at this game and thought we would see the Broncos have to air it out a bit more, have to throw down the football field, just because simply the Texans, that's what they like to do. But this game played a lot slower than I would have guessed going into it. Because even CJ Stroud didn't even throw 30 passes. Neither of these QBs threw for 30 passes, which is kind of rare. Unless it's like, Bailey Zappi against Tim Boyle. You expect both quarterbacks, or at least one of them, to throw over 30 times. Neither of them doing it yesterday in that Houston win. Let's go to Philadelphia, Ray. That was a big showdown between the 49ers and the Eagles. And I would say near perfection on the San Francisco side. Last Friday, you and I were hanging out here, and we were coming off the Thursday night affair between Seattle and Dallas, and we kind of made the statement again that DK Metcalf, you got to play him. I don't care about the matchup or anything, or what he's done, you play him. And even when we were making that statement last Friday, Ray, we brought up the name Deebo Samuel.
Yep.
And saying, hey, even when it's not great, you still have to play him. He's a difference maker. He can do it in a snap. And what do you know, Ray? We saw that in week 13. That was Deebo Samuel at his peak. The dude had 7 touches. He had 4 targets. He's never a guy getting 11, 12, 13. He's not that guy. Yet, Ray, he still can lead the position. He was number 2 this week behind Metcalf, but he can still absolutely go off with very minimal work. And we saw that against Philadelphia on Sunday.
Yeah, 7 touches, 138 yards from scrimmage, 3 touchdowns for Deebo Samuel. And you saw it. You get the ball in his hands, and he's electric. And you've commented for years, like, no one can tackle this guy. Like, one-on-one, you can't do it. And he's slipping tackles. He's running by people. And I used the term earlier, and I'll repeat it. The Niners boat raced the Eagles. They destroyed them. Like, I mean, you could have said the Niners were going to win this game. You could have made a play for that. But the fact that they stomped them out was shocking. And one of the main reasons they did that is they got the ball in Deebo Samuel's hand, though, to your point. Kind of like with DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf had the 6, the 160, and the 3, whatever it was. He actually had fewer targets in that game than he'd been averaging the past month. Deebo Samuel, this is a high-end touch count for him because of all the weapons the Niners have. But it wasn't, like you said, 14 targets. It was anything like it was 4 targets. He was extremely effective as always. Brock Purdy did his thing. CMC did his thing, and it was a 42-19 slaughter fest.
Well, and you're right. They were a boat race, but what's amazing is the first quarter, they did nothing.
Yeah.
After one quarter, it looked like Philadelphia was dominating this game.
Agreed.
And I think the final number was 6 straight possessions for the 49ers that ended in touchdowns. And all these guys were involved. And McCaffrey did not have a huge game, but a very good game. He was still an RB1 like he always is. Brock Purdy, to me, is kind of the wild card here, perhaps, Ray. I almost feel like with the way he is playing, with the way this offense is built, he's a QB1, and that's kind of wild to say. He's not going to give you any rushing yardage, but it's weird, Ray. You could sit here and say, would you rather have Brock Purdy or Trevor Lawrence? And wouldn't you have to go Purdy? And that is a dramatic flip from just 3 months ago. And that's not the only one, but Brock Purdy, I think, Ray, has just become so efficient, and he's got so many weapons. And of course, Shanahan's, doing his magic with the play calling. And it's not going to be 4 touchdowns and 300 yards every week, but it just seems like he's a better bet for that than even a guy like Trevor Lawrence, who coming into the season, you thought he'd be the guy with 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. He hasn't done that once this season.
Yeah, and Trevor Lawrence, we've talked about previously here on the show. He's been a disappointment given the expectations. He's played a little bit better the last couple of games, but still, there's room for growth there, I think, with him. But Purdy, We had him ahead of Lawrence this week in the rankings over at fantasyguru.com. And Purdy, it's so interesting to me because I think I made this statement previously. I'll do it again here. Brock Purdy and Tua Tagovailoa are the same guy. Tua gets all the accolades, right?
Mm-hmm.
He does national championship. He gets all the accolades, all this kind of stuff. He does the exact same thing Brock Purdy does. And it's funny because there's that connection with the coaching staff for both teams. But they just scheme things up. They get guys running all over the place. They get motion and all this kind of stuff. The quarterbacks drop balls in zones. The receivers catch the ball and run like the Dickens. And that's what they do. And, you see how effective it can be. And it's so fascinating to me that everyone talks about Tua and Tyreek Hill. Fine. But the Niners, Brock Purdy's doing the same thing. He's just as effective, if not more effective. Look at the numbers, right?
Yeah.
And the Niners, the Niners are 9-3. And, there was a wobble there, right, with the Niners a little bit in the recent past. But now, would you want to play the Niners or the Dolphins? I'd rather play the Dolphins. If I was
and we talk a lot about efficiency. Let me give you a perfect example here. Who has thrown the least passes in the NFL this year? Which team? It's San Francisco. They're
impressive.
32nd. They've thrown the least. Despite that, they are number 3 in points scored this year. They are number 3 in yardage this year. They are 7th in passing yardage. That's efficiency, folks. They are 4th in passing touchdowns. Ray, those things don't compute that you could be 32nd in pass attempts. They've thrown fewer passes than the Jets.
Wow.
Fewer passes than the Browns. Fewer passes than the Falcons. Those are teams that have no business throwing the football. Those lousy teams with lousy quarterbacks. Despite the lack of passing, the 49ers dead last in pass attempts, but they're 7th in passing yardage. They are 4th in passing touchdowns. That's insane, Ray. I doubt that has ever happened. I'd love to look at the history of the NFL and look at teams that were dead last in the number of throws for the course of a season, yet finished top 5 in passing touchdowns.
Yeah,
it's like I go back to like 1950 or something for something like that.
It would be like the guy who led the league in touchdown receptions was getting 4.8 targets a week, or the number 2 running back in fantasy football is getting 12 and a half touches. Like it can happen, but my gosh, it doesn't happen. That is shocking to point it out the way you did, Kyle. And let's be frank too. It's through 12 games to the Niners. Like, can they keep this up through another 5 games? It's really, they're walking that fine line, right? Everything has to go right. Guys got to break tackles. Guys got to be healthy, all that kind of stuff. But the efficiency is to insane levels, and you just laid out the numbers.
On the Philadelphia side, again, they get blown out, but really, I don't know that there's any worries here. Maybe Jalen Hurts just continues to get beat up. By the time we get to the end of the season, what's left of Jalen Hurts? He's toughing it out, and he's playing. There was concussion fear yesterday, but he passed the protocol. Good to see A.J. Brown kind of get back to being A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. They all kind of did their things. The disappointment would have been DeAndre Swift, but he got game scripted out of this game. So it's just one of those weeks for the Eagles. I don't think there's anything long-term here. Let's move to Cleveland and the Rams. Ray, I talk about Brock Purdy and his touchdowns. We talk about Jordan Love and his touchdowns. We got to give a shout out to Matthew Stafford. Look at this, Ray. 7 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks for Matthew Stafford. I will say that. I will give him the plug, and then I will tell you who cares. It's great, and it's fun, and the Rams are surprisingly competitive. Mm-hmm. Like, they're in the playoff race. Absolutely in the playoff race. But in terms of, like, the outlook for Matthew Stafford, it's, hey, if you got him as your QB2, be happy, but don't think of starting him because you're chasing points in future weeks.
Yeah, he basically was throwing for 206 yards and a touchdown every week until these last 2 weeks where the offense has exploded. And full kudos to him and the play calling, all that kind of stuff. But like you said, even yesterday, this is 2 weeks in a row, he's had 7 touchdown passes. Like he can't throw for 300 yards in this offense. That's not happening. The offense has really become very much about Kyren Williams the last couple of weeks. Again, yesterday, 88 yards and a touchdown on the ground, 3 receptions. Cooper Kupp's not right. He's just not. Puka Nacua is not right.
He left the game twice yesterday with like 2 separate. He was ill, and then he had a shoulder/ribs, and he still managed over 100 yards, which is a plus. But that was all in the first half.
Yeah, and he had a couple carries for 34 yards. So yesterday was a very productive day from a fantasy perspective for Puka. But he's not right physically. So when you have your top 2 wide receivers aren't right, and let's not forget Tyler Higbee, who they end up saying it was a neck issue.
Yeah.
I mean, he walked off the field holding his hand like it was in 14 pieces, but somehow it was his neck. I guess it was pain through his arm. He's not right. So this team is really, they're on that razor thin edge. And, it's not, I don't think it's going to end up in a situation where the Rams are in the playoffs. And I'd be very concerned if I had these pieces in the fantasy world other than Kyren Williams as well, because of the reasons I discussed. But another strong game from them, and they whooped down on the Browns.
Yeah, and they are a team that runs to set up the pass. That's what they're doing. That's why Kyren Williams is so critical. They need a guy or any guy. I mean, we saw it with the backups that they used when Williams was gone. They want to run, and that will set up the pass. And I and Ray have both been pretty critical of Sean McVay over the years, but this is a good coaching job. This team was not expected to be good this year. Sometimes we forget what expectations were. A lot of people felt the Rams had some of the worst personnel in the NFL coming into this year. They thought they were like a 3 or 4 win team. With the win yesterday, they're 6-6. They have won 3 in a row. Now they go to Baltimore. So a little bit of a different challenge there. They defeat Cleveland, which, by the way, everybody fears Cleveland's defense, right? 36 points for the Rams. Ray, on Cleveland's side, Joe Flacco was better than anybody could have hoped for.
It's pretty good.
At the same point, it didn't really matter. And Amari Cooper gets injured. David Njoku doesn't get used. Probably the most notable thing here, and I didn't get to watch all of this game. I was kind of focusing a little more on the Niners-Eagles. But I did see the snap percentages at the end. And you can look at the box score. And Kareem Hunt and Jerome Ford, it was 50-50 yesterday between those two. It appears, and Ford's not been bad since taking over for Nick Chubb. It's kind of an every week starter, but it's probably a little less than people were hoping for. Kareem Hunt, slowly but surely, Ray, kind of working into form, working into this offense, and definitely stealing some of the work from Ford that we thought would go his direction.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Ford is a top 20 running back right now, I think. I didn't look at the numbers this morning, but I think that's accurate. He had the touchdown reception yesterday from Flacco. They lost Nick Chubb. Let's not forget that, right? They lost Nick Chubb, arguably the best running back in football. They lost him, and they've gone with kind of a two-headed monster. Ford plays more snaps, and he runs more routes, but Hunt's always around. Hunt oftentimes gets as many or more touches. He's utilized at the goal line an awful lot. Hunt doesn't do anything. I mean, he hasn't really done anything like in 3 years. He doesn't do anything. He gets what's blocked. He gets in the end zone okay. But you're right. It is enough of a concern that, with Ford, you're never super excited. I think we had him ranked Ford this week, 22nd, something like that at running back. So, again, you got your touchdown and, so he's in kind of that zone where it's like I just said, you play Ford. You're not looking for huge efforts from him. I think another exciting thing is Cedric Tillman. Because of the injury to Cooper, Cedric Tillman ended up leading all the wideouts for the Browns in snaps, in routes run, and he was second in targets. So maybe the youngster, depending upon the health of Cooper, is someone that might be able to help down the stretch. Yeah,
is it an ad, though? It's like if you're doing it with Joe Flacco, and even if Cooper's out, it's like, man, I guess, we're all looking for the playoffs. It's very late in the season. I don't know if any of us are finding starters floating around on the waiver wire. I guess if you were to add Tillman for $2-3, fifth receiver, it's one of those, you hope you never have to break that case, Ray. You never want to have to use Cedric Tillman, but I guess there'd at least be some thought to the proposition. So Cleveland comes up short there, still in a pretty good spot despite. I would say this, Ray, was Joe Flacco was that the best quarterback game that we've seen from a Brown QB this year? It might have been.
I mean, it wasn't worse. I'll tell you, it wasn't the worst. And there were moments that Deshaun Watson looked better, but entire games, maybe not.
Well, we might have thought we were done with Joe Flacco forever. Obviously, we weren't. You also might have thought you were done with Trevor Siemian forever. We are not. Trevor Siemian comes into the fourth quarter for the Jets, 13-8, Falcons over the Jets. This is truly one of those games where neither team deserved to win. Neither team played well. I don't even think the defense has played well. I mean, you shouldn't be giving up 8 points to Trevor Siemian and Tim Boyle. Trevor Siemian came in the fourth quarter, Ray. He had 3 fumbles.
He fumbled on every snap.
Yeah. He only lost 1, but he had 3 fumbles. This game was bad. I mean, I don't even know where to start. I guess with Atlanta, it's more of the same. I credit to Arthur Smith. Maybe he's at least using Bijan Robinson. The efficiency's crap, but he's getting work. Desmond Ritter's not very good. The offense is not very good, but they're in the driver's seat for the playoffs. It's ridiculous. We have another backup tight end, not named Jonnu Smith, catching touchdown passes in Atlanta. That would be my Cole Pruitt. On the Jets side, Ray, the only thing I really care about here is we got some late news right before kickoff that, hey, this was going to be a chance for Dalvin Cook to get work. It came out literally like 15 minutes, and Breece Hall's been battling some things. We also got some news last week against Robert Saleh. I missed this, but Robert Saleh said something about Breece Hall kind of having an issue getting the tough yards, or, not being that between the tackles runner. And then yesterday we see Dalvin Cook. He gets more work than he's seen in like 2 months. Breece Hall still gets his work, but doesn't do anything with it. Are you worried about work for Breece Hall down the stretch? Suddenly people seem to be worried. I don't know where this is coming from, that suddenly the Jets are wanting to use Dalvin Cook, but I guess I'd still have to be in the Breece Hall camp as long as he's healthy.
The Jets are impossibly, and I mean with a capital I, impossibly bad. They're absolutely flipping horrible. And this goes, Robert Saleh, who did a lot of things right, coming from the Niners, going over there, everyone's excited about that. I don't know what's the plan here. By the way, we got news yesterday morning that Aaron Rodgers is probably not going to play this year. Shocker. It's exactly what we said last week.
24 hours, we get different news or different goals for Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, shocker. We said this last week. Aaron Rodgers is never going to play. The Jets are playing to lose. If you're a Jets fan, you haven't picked that up yet. I'm sorry, but they're not trying to win football games. Tim Boyle is hideous. Trevor Siemian is awful. They have to be playing Zach Wilson of any of these three guys, even though he's not any good. Yeah. They've gone away from that. Now we're hearing that Breece Hall's trying to hit home runs. You think he's trying to hit home runs? You have no offense. If he doesn't do that, what's the difference between 8 points and 10? For the head coach to come out and there's two players on this team that they need to build around skill-wise offensively. It's Wilson and Hall, right? That's for the head coach to come out publicly and say, whoa, and then to give Dalvin Cook, what is the coaching staff doing? They're either losing, tanking on purpose, which again, okay, fine, or they've imploded this team so much to the point they're going to have to blow it up in the offseason, Kyle, because this is disastrous. This doesn't make any sense. They're impossibly bad.
Yeah. Well, and I think we said this on Friday. You still have to start Hall. You still have to start Garrett Wilson.
Yeah.
As bad as this offense is, you still do, because those guys are singular talents. And like you said, they can hit the home run. Mm-hmm. So if they do it, you win. And, the Jets are damn ugly here. The Falcons aren't much better. I guess field goal kickers are kind of the name of the game with both those teams. But it's pretty disappointing to watch the Jets. And, okay, you lost your quarterback. Guess what? Half the NFL loses their quarterback. And they have been unable to coach up a single quarterback.
Correct.
I mean, they can't even get 20 points.
Nope.
It's really ugly. And their defense constantly puts that offense in a good position. Yep. They can't run block. They can't pass block. There is, and Ray, they're going to get away with it because we lost Rodgers. We lost Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
First off, you didn't lose Patrick Mahomes, okay? And Aaron Rodgers is good, but he's 40, okay? He's not the guy who's going to win MVPs. Aaron Rodgers is, you hope he's a top 10 quarterback. I guess you were counting on leadership. He can still be a leader on the sidelines. If he's a great leader, like this will never be said about Aaron Rodgers, Ray, but what do you think he's doing to help Zach Wilson or to help Tim Boyle in the QB room? Like, do you think that's happening? It probably is, but I wonder how much Aaron Rodgers' heart is really into it right now with the Jets.
Well, I know that the Jets were putting out on social media the fact that Aaron Rodgers was taking phone calls for season ticket holders. Like, that's what he's doing with his free time, and that. I mean, again, think about this. This guy is a nobody. He can't stop, and the team can't stop pushing him. You suck. You blew it. You made bad. Stop saying Aaron Rodgers is a good guy. Hey, can I help you buy some season tickets? Who cares? How about get in the room, like you said, with the quarterbacks?
Oh, Ray, I would, if Aaron Rodgers called me right now, I would hang up on you and I'd take the call.
Well, that's fine. I'd hang up on him. I'd say, you suck. I don't know what he's doing. I know in the past, Aaron Rodgers has not exactly been very friendly, according to all the reports, to the people in the quarterback room. Now, again, I don't know. He's a different stage of his life. He's out, doing ayahuasca, and who knows, maybe he's a great guy now. I don't know. But if he's helping these guys, they're not listening because they're not doing anything on the field, Kyle.
Who's in a worse spot, Jets offense or the Patriots offense?
Patriots, and that's saying something.
Well, and the reason I would agree with you is, like we said, the Jets have Hall, they have Wilson. I think those guys can be upper end at their position. Patriots don't have that. And the only guy who came close, they lost yesterday. And the Ramondre Stevenson injury rate did not look good. Ankle injury. He fumbled on the play. I think he's doing MRI today. Wouldn't be surprised at all if he misses time or if he goes on the IR, which means that Zeke Elliott, Ray, jump on board the Zeke Elliott train, right?
He got 21 touches yesterday.
He's going to get another 20 on Thursday against the Steelers.
Yeah, they don't have anybody. Like Ty Montgomery is going to start to be involved here. Oh my God, Ty Montgomery. They don't have
Kevin Falk. Maybe they'll give a call to Kevin Falk and get him back on the team.
You think is he still available?
James White, he'd be a good call up right now.
They've got Kevin Harris, Ty Montgomery, and they signed JaMychal Hasty recently. So that's the backups behind Ezekiel Elliott. So it's very reasonable to say Ezekiel Elliott's floor is now 15 touches. It's very reasonable to say, as we saw yesterday, 4 catches, because that's what Stevenson's been doing. And, they lost to Mario Douglas. He's missed a couple of games here, and he'd been catching 5 passes a week to help out the wide receiving core. But there's no one here that dominates the offense in terms of touch count as a pass catcher. They have, for some reason, decided to completely stop utilizing their tight ends. I think that Gesicki and Henry, the last 4 games, and I'm making this up, but have 9 catches. I'd be surprised if it's more than that. They don't even use their tight ends.
Them.
Yeah, they don't even use their tight ends anymore. This offense is also impossibly bad. And, Bill Belichick and the defense keep them in games even yesterday, right? They scored 0 points. They were in the football game. But it's Ezekiel Elliott time, and it's going to be 3.7 yards and a cloud of dust. There's going to be nothing but volume there, and you hope he gets in the end zone.
But Ray, I would say because of that volume, he's an RB. He's a low-end RB2, is he not? Looking ahead, and this is Thursday night, quick turnaround.
Right.
Wouldn't you say that, or would you not?
I would say flex because their offense is so bad. I don't know if they can generate enough movement here to, put them in unless the defense turns the ball over at the 10-yard line. Can they drive down the field for a touchdown? They're so bad. He's in play to start.
Here's how bad the offense is, Ray. The last 3 weeks, the Patriots defense has allowed 10 points, 10 points, and 6. They have lost all 3. That is spectacularly bad. And the best thing you can say about Bailey Zappi is he didn't turn the ball over. Because that's Mac Jones. At least Zappi didn't turn it over. They did not get into the red zone once. And remember, the Chargers are one of the weaker defenses in the entire NFL. Now, the Patriots are more of the same, right? I don't think anybody looks at that and goes, oh, my God, can you believe the Patriots got shut out? They might look at this and say, can you believe the Chargers only got 6 points? Now, I get it. Weather, it was ugly. It was messy. But I don't care. 6 points when you have Austin Eckler, when you have Keenan Allen, when you have Gerald Everett, and when you have Justin Herbert. I don't care about the weather. Okay? 6 points. And Herbert's going to catch all the hell here, Ray. And I get it. It's a killer when your quarterback goes out and has 212 scoreless yards. Murders your week. So I get it. I lost because of Justin Herbert. But I'm starting to feel, Ray, there's a lot more than Herbert going on here. He didn't get sacked. He didn't throw a pick. He's got guys dropping balls. Eckler's now dropping balls. Eckler is doing nothing this season. Just absolutely nothing. The problems are bigger than Justin Herbert. I get the anger at him. And Ray, we know there's going to be an anger benching of Justin Herbert. Who are they playing this week? I got to look up the Chargers because somebody's going to be so pissed off that they're just going to say, this guy's not a QB1. He sucks. He's no good. They scored 6 points against New England.
Denver this week, Kyle.
People may bench him against Denver, Ray. I wouldn't be surprised. And again, everybody's got different options, different possibilities. But I would just tell the Herbert owner, it has not been as bad as you think. It hasn't been great, but he's kind of having a Patrick Mahomes season. Mahomes hasn't been great. Herbert hasn't been great either this year. But there are bigger things. Like the Eckler thing's frustrating as all get out to me. He has done so little, Ray, when he's out on the field this season.
Yeah, and to use the word, he looks little now. And it's, when you have an offensive line that struggles at run blocking, when you can't run the football, when your guys can't catch. Quentin Johnson, Like, he can't catch.
Yeah.
He legitimately can't catch. You mentioned, all these guys, Allen's dropping pass. They can't. No one has done a single thing to help out Herbert out. No one on this offense. The coaching staff, whatever they're doing, is not working. We talked about Staley, like he should be fired. Like, this is bad stuff, man. You're 5-7 after you won 6-0 against an inept Patriot. Like, even though you won the football game, like you said, you can't walk away from this and feel good. So I think that Herbert is, to me, he's still someone I'm starting. Like, I'm not gonna, go rogue and play Joe Flacco. I'm not. There's so much bad quarterback play in the NFL, statistically speaking, that I don't know how you wouldn't start Herbert. Because, again, if you picked Herbert, he was the 5th, 6th quarterback off the board. You shouldn't – maybe you had Kyler Murray. Maybe you drafted him late because he was hurt. Okay. But in most scenarios, I think you have to keep starting him. I think that – and same with Eckler. Yeah. But Eckler is torpedoed. Like, if he doesn't get in the end zone, he's Ezekiel Elliott.
Well,
like,
there was always the saving grace rate of 5 catches. 6 catches, 50 yards. That's gone too.
Yeah. Well,
like yesterday, I get it. Bad weather. You can't have a dump off to Austin Eckler in the backfield.
Well, he had a ball go right through his hands when they tried that.
They tried that and said, never again. Sorry, all pro. You're not getting another opportunity.
Well, and you've talked about this. We've talked about this on the show. We at fantasyguru.com warned about this, that the offense was going to be different because the OC was gone and all that. Are we going to sit here and say we saw this coming? I'm not going to say I saw it coming this aggressive.
Yeah, dramatic.
Yeah, like we said, he's going to go from 7 catches to 4.8 or something. Okay, fine. But this offense, like you're saying, it's just bad. And it's gotten to the point now where if Austin Eckler, look at his last handful of games, 2, 4, 2, 5, 2. He's averaging 3 catches a game. That's not even half of where he was at last year. And that just doesn't work in fantasy.
Yeah, it's pretty low. He's got 157 touches on the season. That's in 9 games. And I realize, he hasn't played a full 4 quarters in all 9 games, but that's 17 touches, which that's fine. Yeah. But the touches aren't happening. You're not doing anything with the touches.
I mean, he averaged, every year he averaged at least 4.2 yards a carry coming into this season. And he was averaging 4.6 yards a carry for his career, 4.6. This year it's 3.5. And it's not all on him, right? It's not all on him, but that's a catastrophic fall. That's catastrophic. And when you have your running back doing what he has done, and he's had a game of 14 carries, 27 yards, 14 carries, 47 yards, 14 carries, 18 yards. Like, he's getting 14 carries and not rushing for 30 yards. Like, that's impossible to do, yet he's doing it.
Moving from Foxborough, let's go to Nashville. A very entertaining game between the Colts and the Titans. It went to OT. Indianapolis wins 31-28. And there's a lot of fantasy fallout here. First off, Derrick Henry got you 2 touchdowns, got you 100 yards, left with concussion. So we'll have to follow his status throughout the week. Tajay Spears could become quite popular as an ad on the waiver wire. Zach Moss on the other side. A lot of work, Ray, but not much didn't do anything with it. And I said this last night. I get it. It's frustrating. Didn't do it. But hey, pay attention. 21 touches, 9 of them in the red zone. He is still an absolute starter, even after this kind of a dud effort yesterday against the Titans.
Yeah. Trey Sermon had 1 snap. Tyler Godson had 3. He played every snap. He got every touch. So yeah, this is in that same Joe Mixon zone, right? When you're playing all the snaps, you're getting all the touches, you're a starter. Even if you don't put up good numbers that week, you still should be starting next week.
Michael Pittman, huge game for him. Back-to-back weeks of double-digit catches. I think he's closing in on 90 for the season, so he's been racking them up in a PPR setup. And Gardner Minshew, Ray, he's over 300 yards. He has 2 touchdowns. It's kind of like Stafford. I really don't care. If people see this game and they see the moments, like he had the early touchdown to Alex Pierce, the game-winning touchdown to Pittman. Between those 2 moments, it was junk. It was really bad for Gardner Minshew. I wouldn't get carried away. I mean, 302 sounds good, but folks, you're talking about a desperation backup. To me, he should be throwing for 300 yards against the Titans, honestly. Correct. I mean, he threw the football 42 times in this game.
Right.
So I wouldn't get carried away. I kind of see this as a one-off. They are not an offense that is built to score 31 points. Remember, it took them 5 quarters to get to these numbers. So that was a little misleading. And just pointing that out with Minshew, if somebody has a Herbert and Minshew combo, don't start telling me Gardner Minshew is going to start over Justin Herbert this week. Don't do that, Ray.
Agreed.
Will Levis, okay. Everything else on Tennessee kind of junky. I don't know. Am I missing something with the Titans, Ray? It's so boring. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is DeAndre Hopkins, but I guess Tajay Spears. That would be the question.
Right.
If Henry's out, Spears, is he kind of in that Zach Moss mode where he's going to get 20 touches for the Titans?
I mean, Tajay Spears had 13 of his touches yesterday. And what do you have altogether? 20 touches. He had 13 of them in the fourth quarter and overtime. Like, he became the offense once Henry left with the concussion. And you saw yesterday, he makes it happen. He moves the change. He's got speed. He can catch the ball to the backfield. And I'll say it just to say it. If you had Henry and you didn't have Spears and he's on the waiver wire, you blew it. You should have been handcuffing your guys. And this is another example of that. If Spears is available on the waiver wire because the Henry owner wasn't smart, people are going to break the bank potentially, because it depends on records and everything like that. But this is week 14. The majority of fantasy playoffs obviously start next week in week 15, or 2 weeks from now, week 15. So if you need to win this week, and the chances of Henry getting cleared after concussion are, 75-25 to the no, Spears is looking at 20 touches this week. So yeah, I think that he's going to be extremely exciting if he's still available on the waiver wire, though. To both our points, he really shouldn't be. Blow
the budget if you got any money left and you need a running back. Probably doing it if Henry is going to be out. Let's go to New Orleans, where the Lions won 33-28. They came out roaring. It was like 21-0, 6-7 minutes into this game. For Detroit, nothing was really exciting here. I mean, Jared Goff was okay, and Gibbs and Montgomery okay. Probably the biggest letdown was Amon-Ra St. Brown. The excitement was Sam Laporte, a huge game for him. 9 catches. I think he is the second rookie tight end in the history of football to have a game with at least 140 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. Or not 2 touchdowns, and 9 catches. I think that was the number. So the other guy was like Pete Mitchell of the Jaguars in 1995. So that's way back. The Saints side is a little more worth talking about, Ray. Chris Olave played and did Olave things. So anybody who took a chance, he did very well. Derek Carr knocked out again. Saints fans were booing Derek Carr at one point. Jameis Winston came in, looked bad. Taysom Hill.
Oh, boy.
You got to start him, Ray. I know I can't stand him. I know you can't stand him. There's no predictability. It's actually becoming a little more predictable with Taysom Hill, to where you can pretty well say, Ray, he is going to get 10 to 15 touches a week, and he's going to get goal line work. And because of that, he belongs as a starter, whether he's tight end or a running back, whatever you got him listed as. He probably belongs as a starter, does he not? And I hate saying that because it's a gadget player, but right now they are so gadgeting him every time they have a chance that you can't ignore it anymore with Taysom Hill.
Kamara should have had 3 touchdowns yesterday. He had one they overturned on replay. The next play, Taysom Hill got his rushing touchdown. So, it was close to him not having a touchdown yesterday. But to your greater point, Taysom Hill is a must start at this point. And I'll say it this way, and I'm gonna go on a crusade in 2024. I'm being dead serious here.
Okay.
If we are still in fantasy leagues where Taysom Hill's a tight end, I'm gonna blow this thing up. Because Taysom Hill does not play tight end.
I don't know if he's played a snap as a tight end this year.
He doesn't play tight end. This would be akin to us being in baseball and saying, "Oh, you know what? Yeah, that Garrett Cole's pretty good as a pitcher. I'm going to play him as catcher today."
Shohei Ohtani's a second baseman.
Yeah, he doesn't play tight end. Jared Goff, what position? He's eligible at wide receiver in my league. He doesn't play tight end. So stop this. It's so amazingly stupid that providers continue to perpetuate this. He doesn't play the position. And we've talked about this. If Taysom Hill, because I know he's going to be listed as tight end next year, then Deebo Samuel needs to be listed as a running back.
Yeah.
I mean, he plays as much or more.
He's got way more of an argument to be a running back than Hill does as a tight end. Yeah.
So
now what about Hill as a quarterback? He still takes snaps.
Yes.
In the shotgun,
absolutely.
So you can use him as a quarterback.
He's a quarterback. There's no one in the backfield behind him. That's a quarterback. Okay, so because of the way he's utilized, because of the continual injuries with Carr, because of the fact that Jameis Winston just flings balls. If Jameis Winston starts, Chris Olave is going to get 14 targets.
He had some wide open receivers that he missed by 5 yards yesterday.
Olave made that great catch near the goal line where he had to adjust and spin back, and so I could even see a scenario where Taysom Hill starts throwing 5 to 10 passes a week. Right. So, yeah, Taysom as a starter. It's a loophole that let's exploit. Fine. but it's awful for the game of fantasy football because it's just a bastardization of what we're trying to do.
We're a few minutes away from Ryan Clifford joining us, DFS preview. We'll also get to some of your questions in a bit. But let's get to these other games on Sunday. Arizona 24, Pittsburgh 10. Kenny Pickett knocked out. Good chance Mitchell Trubisky. In fact, not a good chance. It is going to be the case. Trubisky's going to be the quarterback on Thursday for that game against the Patriots. I don't know if that changes much of anything for Pittsburgh, Ray. I mean, if you're somebody starting Najee Harris or Jalen Warren or Deontay Johnson or George Pickens, the QB change literally should not change your thoughts on any of those guys. If you started them last week, you got to start them this week.
I think you're right. And, I would say, honestly, it's probably, let's call it a 10% improvement. Like, it's not, I think that Trubisky does some things that Pickett can't do. He's willing to stretch the field. I think he can use his legs a little bit more. So it's an overarching point to what you said. It doesn't change anything appreciably. If anything, I think it helps a slight bit.
For Arizona, James Conner, a couple of touchdowns, a lot of carries, 25, over 100 yards in his return. What was notable to me, Ray, is Trey McBride again. And I looked this up. Since week 8, the number one tight end in a PPR setup is Trey McBride. And you watch the Cardinals with Kyler Murray and you watch McBride. It's got the look of a guy who should be like a top 5, top 6 tight end next season. Like, he is a weapon. Obviously, the Cardinals dumped Zach Ertz, so they realize it. I think McBride's the real deal. Him and Laporta, we talked about Laporta, huge game against the Saints. Both those guys, I think, have emerged as very solid. I would put them in the Kittle area going into next season of guys who should be good for 5 catches, 60 yards, and maybe even blow up efforts from time to time throughout 2024.
Yeah, and the Commanders and the Cardinals are both off this week in week 14. So you lose McBride this week, which is terrible as we head into the playoffs or gets ready to head into the playoffs. But your point with McBride is totally valid. And, I think this offense really needs Michael Wilson, who can't get on the football field. We haven't seen him get an opportunity, the youngster. Haven't seen him get an opportunity to work with Kyler Murray. The Cardinals have a roster that's constructed of a bunch of players, and I mean a bunch of players that are 5'9". The quarterback is 5'9". I don't think Rondale Moore is 5'9". I don't think Greg Dortch is 5'9". Like, everyone on this offense is tiny. And, if you get things going and you scheme things right and you got the right defense and the right matchups, it can work. But they need a 6'2", 230 guy out wide, because what they're doing now is everything's going to Trey McBride because everything else is gadget. Everything else, we're running around Kyler Murray and hoping he can flip. So their offense right now is Conner on the ground and McBride as a pass catcher. That's really how they're moving the ball consistently on the offensive side.
You mentioned the Commanders as well as the Cardinals. Those are the only 2 teams on bye in week 14, last bye week of the season. It is, playoff week for a lot of you, but at least it's the Cardinals and the Commanders. Speaking of Washington, they were trounced by Miami, 45-15. Tyreek Hill, another massive effort for him. Ray, seriously, MVP, right? There's not anybody else really emerging. Mm-hmm. If he gets to 2,000 yards, like every week, Ray, it's stunning. I think is he at 1,481 with 5 games to go? So he'd need 519 over the final 5 games. I think that's where we stand with Tyreek Hill. But I could absolutely give this guy MVP votes, which for those who don't follow it, that is usually the province of QBs and nobody else. Right. Tyreek Hill, you can be the offensive player of the year. But the MVP is for quarterbacks. I don't know if Jalen Hurts, yeah, he's going to get votes, obviously. He'll probably win it. But I think Tyreek Hill has a claim here as an MVP.
I think he does. And I've said these things a lot over the years. Like, we used to watch Cooper Kupp when he was going nuts the last couple of years, right? And I'd be like, how is Cooper Kupp wide open all the time? How is Travis Kelce wide open all the time? How is Tyreek Hill open all the time? All Tua Tagovailoa does is drop back and lollipop balls. Tyreek Hill runs under it, catches it, touchdown. Over and over again.
Scheme, baby. That's scheme. Give it credit to Mike McDaniel.
Yeah. And I just, Tua's got great numbers. He's not doing anything. I said this earlier. I think Brock Purdy's just as good as Tua Tagovailoa. Even yesterday on one of the 2 touchdown passes, Tua threw it over the wrong shoulder, and it was almost a Willie Mays scenario by Tyreek Hill. He made a great adjustment to the ball in the air for the score. And so Tyreek is doing all this with scheme and not really with his quarterback elevating him. So to your main point about Tyreek being the MVP, he's in the conversation, Cal. I can't disagree with that at all.
I'm sure Devon Achane was a huge topic going into Sundays. I know you do Twitter over at SiriusXM Fantasy, and a lot of people probably asking about him. Ray, for a lot of people, I would have said, no, don't play him. And I probably would have led them down the wrong path. 2 touchdowns. I I was stunned Mike McDaniel let him get that second touchdown. I mean, that was 4th and goal. You're up 38-15, and you're like, yeah, we're going to go for the touchdown from 2 yards out, and they got it. I mean, totally rubbing it in. Achane looked good. All of his work was in the second half. They pretty well benched Raheem Mostert in the second half. So if you ran the risk, it worked, Ray. It absolutely worked. And I guess after seeing what I saw yesterday, just roll with them. Just go with it. I was a little hesitant just because, how's he going to be used? Is he truly healthy? The weather there was crappy. Do you really want to trust a guy with a bum knee in that kind of weather where it was wet, it was slippery, all that stuff? But if you ran the risk, man, it was a total reward with Devon Achane.
Yeah, I had him at running back 20 this week. I think it was a couple of spots below our rankings at fantasyguru.com. But to your main point, and Jeff Mans wrote about this, Armando Marsal does the review of the week, and Jeff adds the plays you didn't see. And Jeff pointed out quite adroitly, as you just suggested, the Dolphins were destroying the Commanders. The second touchdown Achane scored was for no other reason other than to get Achane a second touchdown. It meant nothing to the game. Achane had 17 carries for 73 yards and 2 touchdowns. On that final drive in the fourth quarter, in a game they were leading by more than 20 points, he had 8 of the 17 carries. He had 45 of the 73 rushing yards, and he had 1 of the 2 touchdowns. Even if he hadn't played that last drive, his day would have still been a success, right? Because he got in the end zone and all that. But literally half his rushing production came on a single drive at the end of the game. In a game they were up by more than 20 points. It didn't mean anything to the game.
But he is starting moving forward. Now that I have seen health, and now that we know the Dolphins are going to scheme this guy into space and let his talent take over, let it roll, man. Let it roll moving forward for Devon Achane. Last game, Tampa 21, Carolina 18. Shout out to Mike Evans, 10 straight years of at least 1,000 yards. Had another huge effort yesterday, big touchdown, 75 yards out. Hall of Famer, right, Ray? I mean, we don't think of Mike Evans as that, but he is, right?
I remember we had a caller on Sirius XM years ago that told us Mike Evans wasn't any good. Do you remember that? Yeah, I mean, he I think he's behind. I saw the graphic right. He's behind only Jerry Rice now with 1,000-yard seasons. He's tied with
Rice had 11 straight, and Evans has 10 now.
Yeah, but to start his career, Evans set the record, as your point. So, I think that barring off-the-field stuff, I mean, the resume speaks for itself. Yeah, I think he's a Hall of Famer.
I think I buried Rachaad White about 6 weeks ago, and ever since, every week, he's totaling 100 yards. He did it again yesterday. Kudos to him. Chris Godwin, no catches. What? But he did have a rushing touchdown, so he saved face there. On the Carolina side, it's another game where Bryce Young's under 200 yards. Adam Thielen is gone. The big development here is Chuba Hubbard. Ray got all the work. 2 touchdowns, over 100 yards, and 25 carries. I hope they stick with it. And I know he doesn't have the name recognition of a Miles Sanders, and Hubbard was not drafted to be like he's going to be our running back for the next 3 or 4 years. But he just produces, does he not? I mean, last year he produced. This year he's producing. Carolina needs to shut up and just give him the football and say, hey, the rest of our team sucks. At least this guy's giving us something in the backfield.
Yeah, Sanders and Hubbard ran the same amount of routes yesterday. So I think Sanders is still kind of involved as the third down back. But the early down back is Hubbard. He played twice as many snaps as Sanders. He had the 104 yards, the 2 touchdowns, 25 carries, and was very productive. And honestly, it's the only part of their offense that works. They fired everyone, right? The coach, head coach, the offensive coordinator, didn't change anything. This offense sucks. And what has happened is that the defense has realized that this offense is Thielen. So the last 2 weeks, he's been negated completely from the offense. Bryce Young can't do anything else. They can't scheme anything else. So the passing game, he went 15 for 31. It's just terrible. So they might as well just keep featuring Hubbard because legitimately he's the only piece of this offense that I think they can have success with on a consistent basis. Because Thielen, who's catching 7 passes every week, what they have last 2 weeks? 4 catches, 5 catches? It's been terrible.
Yeah, maybe it's just safe to say Hubbard is the mutter there for the Panthers because it was real. I mean, there were downpours there in the first half, just a typical South Florida or mid-Florida kind of day with a lot of rain there in the Tampa area. Buccaneers win it, again, 21-18, the final there. And that leaves us with but one more game to go in Week 13. It's the Monday Nighter between Cincinnati and Jacksonville. Head over to fantasyguru.com. Here in a few moments, being posted will be the Showdown article. Ryan Clifford, as always, breaking down the showdown between the Bengals and the Jaguars. And pretty well, as always, he is joining us now on Fantasy Sports Daily to give a few of his thoughts of what he's thinking between Cincinnati and Jacksonville. We'll bring Ryan on here as we get set for this 8:15 kickoff. There he is. Good to see you, Ryan. We got some injury news going on tonight. It sounds like T. Higgins is good to go. At this point, Etienne, I guess I would lean towards him playing more on the field than not. What about the price tags on those individuals? Are they worth the risk when you look at what it will cost you to play Higgins and to play Etienne tonight?
Yeah, I think Higgins, sure, 11,400 as a captain. So, you're looking at his flex salary being kind of, on par with like he's lower than, is he low? No, he's a little bit more than Tyler Boyd, but not much. So, you've got Jake Browning at quarterback though. So I don't like either of those guys really a whole lot tonight. I like Etienne if he was healthy. I think I'd really like this matchup for him, but he's not. So
he's expensive too. I mean, even as a flex, he's the second most expensive guy in this game tonight.
Yeah.
Ryan, everyone's going to play Trevor Lawrence is my assumption. Jake Browning, whatever his name is. What's this? Jake? Is that it? I said it. It sounds wrong. I always want to say Todd Browning, the old director for horror movies. Is there a scenario where you play Browning? You try to be different? Is it not different enough because he's a quarterback and some people are still going to go that direction? Like, what are your thoughts with Browning?
Yeah, I don't mind Browning. The Jaguars have been horrendous against the pass this year. What I like about Browning is he's a guy that will take off and run. Back in college, he ran for 16 rushing scores as a Washington Husky. I think he had 40 yards in his first game on the ground against the Ravens when he came in for Burrow. He's been in the optimal lineup, both times that he's appeared this season. So I don't mind Browning. I don't think he's going to get much ownership. I think, like you said, everybody's going to play Lawrence. He's going to be the quarterback everybody plays. Lawrence does not have a very good record playing in these primetime showdown games. Well, playing in showdown games in general. He's played almost 50 games in his career so far. He's been in the optimal lineup in a showdown contest of those 47 games. I think it is just 19 times. He's been the optimal captain just once out of 47 games. So for whatever reason, he just does not do well in these showdown contests. So I think I'd lean towards fading Lawrence and playing Browning.
You and Kyle were talking about Etienne, who comes in at 10,200 over at DraftKings. What about the lead back on the other side with those Bengals, from Cincinnati? $7,000 for Joe Mixon. And we were just talking about workloads, Ryan, and the only game in town in the backfield for the Bengals is Joe Mixon. They've got to get him involved to try to, move the chains and help out their quarterback. What is your willingness to play Joe Mixon tonight at that price point?
Mixon's another guy I don't really like tonight. This is as bad as Jacksonville's been against the pass. They've been super solid against the run. I think, especially with Browning at quarterback, Jags can afford to kind of throw an extra guy in the box there to try and stop the run. So I don't really like Mixon here tonight.
I understand why it's the case, but I'm still a little taken aback that Jamar Chase and Calvin Ridley are so close in price. Whether you want to captain them or flex them, I mean, it's really tight between those two guys, which I guess we understand, Ryan, Jake Browning versus Trevor Lawrence, but should it be that close? I mean, is Chase in a much better spot than somebody like Calvin Ridley, who's really been up and down throughout the season?
Yeah, I still got Chase projected a little bit higher than Ridley, but I do think it's close. I think you look at the injuries that Chase has been dealing with back and whatever else he's had this season. And then you look at the quarterback that he's playing with. I think these two are close tonight for sure.
Ryan, you've got a pretty high floor with Evan Engram. The problem is there's been no ceiling. There haven't been a lot of games with huge yardage totals. He's not obviously gotten in the end zone. He's 6,200 over at DraftKings. And then you got Mr. Hudson with the Bengals. He's down there at $4,000. And while he's not to Ingram's level, he's been catching 4 passes every week. How do you break down the tight end position tonight?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Engram. He's kind of been like the Deontay Johnson of fantasy football this season with his touchdowns. Only the Denver Broncos. Broncos are the only team in the league that are allowing more PPR points to opposing tight ends than the Cincinnati Bengals. So if there's a game for Evan Engram to kind of break that touchdown streak that I think that it might be tonight. He's definitely one of those players that's due for positive regression. A lot of times when we see these slumps go on and on and on, a lot of times the regression happens with like a monster performance. So, that could be tonight with Engram. He's definitely going to be in my captain pool. I have no hesitation about playing him whatsoever.
This game has a total of 40. Jacksonville's favored by 10, which to play that out, I guess the presumptive score would be 25-15. To hear you talk, and we'll let you go after this, Ryan, to hear you talk, you're kind of feeling the Bengals a little bit more in this matchup. I mean, that's a big underdog, 10 points, and maybe everybody will just follow that line and load up on Jaguars, but don't ignore the Bengals, I guess, for tonight, right?
Yeah, I mean, I still like the Jags. I think it's going to be a pretty low-scoring game, too. But I do. You nailed it. I like the Bengals a little bit more. My model has it 25-20 Jaguars. Okay. So, about the same kind of production out of the Jaguars that Vegas is expecting, just a little bit more out of Cincinnati.
Further breakdown can be found at fantasyguru.com. Column will be posted probably in the next 30, 40 minutes or so. Punt plays. Ryan's always got some good selections there, so you're going to want to have those as you kind of find those cheap guys, maybe below $500, $800, whatever it may be, that you can stick into your lineup to allow you to load up on the likes of a Ridley or a Chase. So do check out the column Discord as well. Ryan and the crew are going to be helping you out as we get closer to that kickoff. 8:15 tonight for the Bengals on the road against the Jaguars. Ryan, a pleasure. Really appreciate it. I know it's been a busy weekend following everything. We will let you run, and we'll talk later in the week.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Ryan Clifford joining us to preview that Monday night game between the Bengals and the Jaguars. Ray, you surprised by that spread? I mean, I think everybody just looks at the quarterbacks and says, oh, Trevor Lawrence is, he's the next big thing. And Jake Browning, who the hell is that? But that's a big number to see the Jaguars favored by 10. They've got the wins. Like, their record looks really nice. To watch them game after game, they've been fine. I mean, they're a decent enough team, but they don't really showcase like, oh, they're just going to blow you off the football field. You never really get that with the Jaguars. It feels
right.
like.
And remember, too, this, Kyle, the spread isn't to entice you to bet.
Yeah.
Like, it's not necessarily that they think it's going to be a 10-point. I'm surprised it's that big. Yeah, I would obviously favor the Jaguars to win the football game, but that's a pretty large spread. We heard Ryan talk about some of the concerns, and you laid them out there too. I agree with you. I think the Jaguars are likely to win this football game, but that's a big spread.
Got a lot of questions that have been flowing in over the previous hour. So big thank you to everybody, and we hope you've been patient with us. We like to run through all the Sunday games, visit with Ryan, and then kind of sift through some of these questions. Let's see. We have got David joining, saying that Justin Fields was dropped in his league. Would you drop Kyler Murray for Justin Fields? Ray, I might.
No,
One thing I would say, it sounds like both these guys, whoever you keep, would be the QB2. It might be just worth looking at your QB1 and kind of how the matchups fit and what weeks you'll be using. So now that's a dangerous game, because you're going to be looking 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out, playing championship weeks. Both Murray and Fields can be bad. I mean, they can. To me, Fields has a little more of like the upside of rushing, Ray, to where he can get to 30 points almost purely off his legs. I might be tempted by that upside, but again, I'd want to look at the schedules and kind of see how they fit with my normal starter week in, week out.
Yeah, I would drop Kyler Murray in a heartbeat.
Okay.
I'm not a Kyler Murray guy. You know that. It's been that. I've said that before he started his NFL career. I look at this. They're on a bye this week, are the Cardinals, right? So you're getting an advantage there. And if you're not playing Fields, you're blocking someone else from playing them. You look at the matchups for Arizona. They've got the Niners when they come back, not playing Kyler Murray, not with any level of confidence. The Bears aren't a great defense, but it's in Chicago. And then they face Philadelphia at Philadelphia in Week 17. That's not a good playoff run for Kyler Murray. Fields has got at Cleveland this week or next week, which is not easy. But as we've seen, Cleveland's defense a little bit listing of late. Then they face Arizona and Atlanta. So I think the schedule a little bit better for Fields, and you get the extra game and you block someone. I'm grabbing Fields.
Yeah, that Murray schedule's rough down the stretch because weather is really going to impact a couple of those games, I think. Let's see. James also looking at quarterbacks. Let's see. He's lost Burrow. He's lost Watson. He now has Kyler Murray on bye. Looking at adding Minshew, Joshua Dobbs, Jameis Winston. I would hold off on all the news I could ever hold off on here. Winston, I almost think is an easy no. I believe. Minshew versus Dobbs, I'd probably lean slightly towards Dobbs, but Ray, he's referencing the fact that for whatever reason, the Vikings are kind of wavering on if they even want Joshua Dobbs to be their quarterback in Week 14.
Yeah, we don't know on Carr. My gut read says he's supposedly had 3 injuries yesterday. My gut read is he's probably not out there, but we don't know. The Vikings head coach, this is not whisper. The head coach basically said, we're going to play whoever gets the ball to Justin Jefferson. And Kyle and I've talked about this. Like, it's very shocking that Josh Dobbs is kind of out the window.
Yeah.
I mean, Minshew's the safest. Minshew's the guy that, if you add, he's going to be starting. Is it a matchup, that I'm going to love? Well, it's at Cincinnati, and we'll see how things go tonight. On the road, weather, potentially all that. But I think Minshew's got to be the out if you're talking right now, because he's the only guy we know for sure is going to start.
Dobbs, if he were starting, would be at Vegas, which I really wouldn't fear that. I might hold out to get that news on Minnesota. God knows they'll probably wait till Friday to tell us, though. I mean, that's just how it's going to be. I just can't imagine. I mean, they still have a shot at the playoffs. Yeah. And Nick Mullins, when was the last game Nick Mullins played? It's been a year and a half, maybe. It's just crazy they'd make that move. Robert, rest of the way, Romeo Dobbs or Garrett Wilson? To me, Ray, it's got to be Garrett Wilson. And I know it's painful. You're like, seriously, with Trevor Siemian or with Tim Boyle? But Garrett Wilson, like, what was it? 3 catches, 50 yards. Like, if Dobbs gets 350, that's kind of a good game for him. Not a great game, but a good. Wilson is still a threat, Ray, to be 80 yards every single week. And he's the only receiving option they really have. I get it. I understand how bad it's been for the Jets offense, but I'd still take the talent that Garrett Wilson gives me.
Yeah, I think that Romeo Dobbs shouldn't be on the waiver wire, because especially with the news with Watson's hamstring, we'll see what that means. It's very reasonable to predict that Watson misses some time. If that happens, Dobbs probably is 8+ targets a week. So I think that, again, Dobbs should not be on the waiver wire. But if I had to make a decision here, I agree with Kyle. Garrett Wilson's got to be the guy you start. As bad as it is with that offense, there haven't been too many clunkers like yesterday from Garrett Wilson. He still is usually catching 6 to 8 passes. He's still getting 70 yards. I'd still go Garrett Wilson over Romeo Dobbs.
And then finally, Sal put it in a question about 20 minutes ago. We were talking about Taysom Hill. He already has Kamara. He's wondering about adding Taysom Hill. Njoku's his current tight end. So it kind of sounds right. He's coming at this from the angle of he could put Taysom Hill as his tight end. But then, of course, you're rolling with the Saints, which aren't a bad offense. They usually play up in the dome. That usually helps their fortunes. I think stashing Hill totally. Now, I'm pretty anti 2 tight ends, but when you get late into the season, you can start to break some of these rules because you don't need a 6th receiver, you don't need a 3rd quarterback, whatever it may be, or you're blocking somebody. I would definitely be interested in blocking people from Taysom Hill. Now, would I say, okay, I'm going to start Kamara and Hill, I'm going to bench Njoku? I could reason that, Ray. Mm-hmm. It may not be my perfect solution, but Njoku, we saw it yesterday, was just a mystery to Joe Flacco. Really had no interest in throwing him the football. I think you absolutely stash Hill, and I think it's on a game-by-game, week-by-week basis, whether you start Kamara and Hill at the same time.
Very surprised that Hill's on the waiver wire. Very surprised by that. I would agree with Kyle. I would add him if for no other reason to block. I think it is very difficult, if not outright challenging, to go with 2 guys, Hill and Kamara, which in essence, you're getting touchdowns from one of them. Again, we saw yesterday, both guys had that success, but it could have been 3 for Kamara if the ball hadn't been turned over, a touchdown had been turned over on review that allowed Hill to get that touchdown the next play. But it's a consideration to start them both. It absolutely is. So you add Hill. It's not an ideal roster construction, but I think you block someone else from getting a weekly starter at tight end, and that might be the person that you face in the playoffs.
And a reminder, each and every week, I think on Tuesday, is it the buy, sell, hold column by our friend Rich Miletto? I think that's out on Tuesday. So he'll go through a lot of these names and kind of give you his take. We have a lot of columns going up over the next few days. Ray mentioned Jeff Mans, Armando Marsal, kind of giving their Sunday thoughts. Also, anytime you just need an answer right away, head into Discord. That thing is staffed pretty well 24/7 because Ray's up at 4 a.m. I know, answering questions in there. Actually, by the time it's 4 a.m. for Ray, it's like 7 a.m. out east. So people are waking up and they can take over for Ray Flowers. Big thank you to everybody sending those questions in. We've got just a few minutes left. And as is normally the case, we go a little extra long on a Monday. Ray, baseball winter meetings have started up in Nashville. Still waiting for some, big signings. I don't know if we'll get Ohtani or Yamamoto and some of those things, but we may see some signings, as is tradition at the winter meetings. We did get a trade late on Sunday, which was a bit surprising, Ray. Seattle throwing in the towel on Jared Kelenic. And remember, they're an offense that has lost Eugenio Suarez and Teoscar Hernandez. So Ray, they have lost 3 regulars in their lineup. They trade Kelenic. They bring in pitching that's like average.
And Evan White, who we talked about last week for the contract.
And the only thing I can fathom here, by the way, Kelenic going to the Braves. So he looks to be in a good spot to be a platoon in left field. But Ray, they got to be clearing house to either trade some pitching for a lot of hitting, or they're going gangbusters after Ohtani.
Right.
And I don't know what it is, but Jerry DiPoto always, there's something brewing with Seattle to make this trade and some of the other moves they've done this offseason.
Yeah, because the trade on the surface doesn't make any sense. We just had on the Brave side, we had them all talking up Vaughn Grissom and how he's going to play left field. Then they basically take on a couple of moderately poor contracts in order to get Kelenic to basically be their left-handed left fielder. So the assumption being that he and Grissom will share the outfield, right? Lefty-righty thing with Kelenic being on the positive side of the platoon. But like you said, on the other side, like there's got to be something here, because for Kelenic, has he lived up to expectations? No. Still 24 years old, and he's an everyday baseball player. He's
not expensive yet.
Yeah, and he's an everyday player. There's no, you can do that and have a good baseball team, right? So they have to have something else in plans. And as you mentioned, their guy likes to deal. So I would not be surprised if there's something significant coming down the pipe. I wouldn't be panicked if I was a Mariners fan just yet. I'm sure something else is coming down the pipe.
Yeah, the offseason is very young for Seattle. They will find something out there, trade or otherwise. And they've been rumored with some of the high-end pitching, not even beyond Ohtani, guys like Blake Snell as a possibility going to Seattle. Remember, they're actually kind of loaded in both the starting rotation and in the bullpen. The 2 guys they got back from Atlanta, one is Jackson Kowar, who's been a prospect but has shown nothing in the major leagues. And then the other guy is a guy who just went through Tommy John surgery and was drafted last season. So that's like a long-term play. So I would suspect Seattle is not done wheeling and dealing. And, of course, everybody's descending on Nashville. We'll see some things happen with Seattle or otherwise. And Ohtani. Still a lot of teams involved, Ray. We're still hearing, a half dozen teams that are absolutely involved for Shohei Ohtani at this point.
Yeah, and Ohtani's, I think, representatives basically said, if you start talking about this in the press, you're out, which I love. I love that, because there's been John Heyman reporting on it. He's not got nothing to say, right? There's nothing really, which I kind of like. Let's just negotiate and figure this out. It seems like the Blue Jays and Dodgers are kind of at the top.
Jays?
Yeah, the Blue Jays and Dodgers are kind of at the top based upon the rumors, which, again, are not verified. But there are other teams, there's 4 or 5 other teams that are kind of circling according to reports. And, ultimately everyone's going to pay Ohtani. So it's not, what's the difference between $400 million, $380 million? He can decide that, right? The question is really going to come down to where does he want to be? Because it's not going to be for lack of suitors. It seems like a lot of teams are willing to pay. And those numbers I threw out might be really low. It might be 480 or 500 million, right? Yeah. But someone's going to pay it. And it sounds like Dodgers, Yankees, and even the Blue Jays seem to be willing to pay that price, if not other teams.
Yeah, Toronto, they've also been, I think at this point, they're considered the leader for Juan Soto. Man, wouldn't you love to see it? I don't know if you can get Juan Soto and Ohtani, but man, you throw those 2 in with Bichette and Vlad Guerrero would be.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's not possible.
Here's the middle of the order.
Yeah, but that's like the Padres thing we were talking about. Like you can't be paying $2 billion in salaries, right? So
well, and this is I don't even know if this is legal, but Ray, Toronto, they and the Braves are the only 2 publicly traded companies. Right. Toronto's what is it? CBC? Is that the television? I'm trying to think. Whoever owns the Blue Jays, it's the big television conglomerate in Canada. And again, I don't even know if it's legal, but Ray, it's like, hey, you want ownership in a TV business? We'll throw in, 200 million shares of our TV. Yeah, you'll be a 20% owner in a TV company. Maybe that's what Ohtani's looking for.
We'll pay you $1 million a year in salary, and here's the rest in stock. I mean,
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how this works out too, because I wonder what the appetite for his representatives and Ohtani in particular is for a inventive contract, right? Is it I just want to get paid, or is it, hey, let's talk about this? You just gave me 180 acres of oceanfront. I don't know what they'll decide.
Well, and Toronto is an extremely international city. They got people from all over the world. It's one of the more internationally, expatriates everywhere coming in Toronto. So maybe that's appealing to somebody like Shohei Ohtani. We shall see. Obviously, he's going to break the bank no matter where he ends up. We are pretty certain he won't end up with the Pirates. That's the expectation. Rogers Communications. Thank you, Mark, for the answer. Yeah, the Rogers Center is where they play. Rogers, Rogres. Not the American spelling of Rogers. Yeah, Res. That gets guys like Ray every time that they write about the Rogers Centers. They have to spell it the Canadian style. Ray, good stuff today. Tomorrow we'll do it again. I think Justin Finsterman's going to stop in for some basketball. We'll obviously recap the Bengals and the Jaguars, and a lot of injuries to follow. So probably some updates on that coming up tomorrow.
Looking forward to it, Kyle. I hope people enjoyed the show today, and they'll be with us again tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll get rolling at 11 a.m. Eastern. Big thank you to everybody tuning in and firing some questions. Thanks to Ryan Clifford as well. We'll catch you on Tuesday. This has been Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by FantasyGuru.com.